Next up, we have Flashcard Biden. Flashcards, you know the flashcards you used to have when you were in elementary school and your parents would like flip a card up and say, what letter is this? What letter is this? And then you got to, well, how do you spell this word? You know, and what is this word? How do you say this word rather? So to show you a word, or what is 7 plus 5? And the math card, the math flashcards, remember those, Chris?
Yeah.
So
multiplication tables.
Multiplication tables. Those were the hard ones. That's when things really started getting hard in math, of course, especially in elementary school. Well, podcast listeners, your president, the president of the United States, I know you're probably saying it's not my president. Well, he's the American president, you know. Joe Biden uses flashcards. Who would have thunk? So not only does he use them, but he used flashcards during his meeting with Vladimir Putin. So in the Western Journal, it says, footage shows Biden reaching for his flashcards immediately after meeting with Putin gets underway. So the meeting starts and Biden picks up like a stack of flashcards that were put there for him on the coffee table. And he gets them all ready because he obviously doesn't remember what he's supposed to ask, let alone probably who he's even with. So here's what the article says. President Joe Biden looked down at flashcards briefly on Wednesday while sitting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Geneva ahead of what was expected to be a 5-hour meeting. That's a long meeting, by the way, for a guy who's almost 80 years old. Biden arrived in Geneva on Wednesday afternoon where Putin had been waiting. The president had spent the days prior to the meeting attending the G7 summit and meeting with allies. Biden and Putin shook hands upon meeting and also each spoke to the media prior to their closed-door sit-down, ABC News reported. By the way, it was a closed-door sit-down, and if it were Donald Trump, who did have closed-door sit-downs with Putin, you know, it was like, he's conspiring with Russia. Well, we don't think that apparently with Joe Biden. He's allowed to use flashcards, and because he forgets where he is, and he's allowed to be in a meeting with the Russian president alone, but no one says anything in the media. Do we have a clip on this? Yeah. And is this just video only or is it audio only?
Let's go.
Okay, so we're going to play this clip of this meeting taking place and Biden picking up the flashcards. Here it is.
Господин президент, хочу вас поблагодарить за вашу инициативу.
So it was the meeting. Of course, if you're listening to the podcast, you can't see it, but they're meeting together. They're both sitting down in this beautiful room in Geneva. And there's that stack of cards, the flashcards. He picks them up and he starts looking at them as he prepares for the meeting. Quote in the Western Journal, I think it's always better to meet face to face to try to determine where we have mutual interest and cooperate, Biden said to CNN. Putin, after greeting Biden, thanked him for the initiative to meet. Quote, I know you've been on a long journey and have a lot of work, the Russian leader told Biden. Still, the United States and Russia and U.S. relations have a lot of issues accumulated that require the highest level meeting, and I hope that our meeting will be productive. As the pair sat down before reporters with top aides, a video showed Biden reaching over to a table where he had appeared to be prepared notes, where there appeared to be prepared notes for the short Q&A alongside the Russian leader. Biden is known to carry notes with him, probably to tell him where he is, and often appears to follow strict guidelines for what he says and whom he speaks to. The 70-year-old sometimes breaks these guidelines and comments about them out loud in a jocular manner. Podcast listeners, did you hear what I just said? He often carries notes around with him and appears to follow strict guidelines for what he says, which is why he has the flashcards and the notes. So the staff is running the country. The staff, because Biden doesn't have the full intellect, because, you know, your mind obviously slows down when you're older. And it's really clear when you look at him talk or when you hear him talk. And they're writing the notes down and telling him what to say and where to go and where he is. So that way he doesn't make any mistakes. I mean, it's just the most ridiculous thing ever. So in that same light, CNN got really upset with Biden in Geneva when he was meeting Putin, because obviously, you know how interested CNN is with presidents who meet Putin. They were really interested in Donald Trump, naturally, because Donald Trump was throwing the country under Putin's control, according to CNN. Well, CNN got really upset because Joe Biden wasn't answering their questions. Jeff Zeleny reported about this, and it's just kind of hysterical to me that they really got upset because CNN wouldn't report the truth if it hit them. Nonetheless, here is the clip. Here it is.
From this summit is set. He wanted to take that off the table. But we have seen President Biden do that frequently. What we've not seen him do is answer questions like that without his aides screaming at him to stop. I have never seen a president, covering the last 4 of them, who is so protected by his aides in terms of often not wanting him to answer some questions.
Yeah, so that is CNN reporter Jeff Zeleny talking about the fact that they're upset that the president wasn't answering their questions and that the aides of President Biden, the same individuals who are writing the flashcards, are saying to the media, you can't ask him any questions because he doesn't have a flashcard for that. So in the Daily Wire, left-wing reporter slams Biden for losing temper over questions. Maybe you're in the wrong business, is what Biden said. So a left-wing reporter slammed President Joe Biden on Wednesday over his outburst, directed at cable news reporter early in the day, suggesting that perhaps Biden was in the wrong business if he could not answer basic questions from the media. If you're the most powerful person in the world and you can't field questions from the media without losing your temper, maybe you're in the wrong business, New York Magazine writer Olivia Nuzzi tweeted. What kind of example does it set for other countries when the President of the United States insults a member of the free press on an international stage for asking a fair question in good faith? Well, she's right. Okay. But did the media just finally wake up and realize there's a free press and that you're supposed to be honest about it? And the presidents are supposed to ask and answer questions? I mean, with Trump, of course, there was no question he wouldn't answer. In fact, you wish sometimes he would stop answering questions and let others do it for him. With Biden, he can't answer a question unless the flashcards are present. So I think we actually have a clip on this as well. It's Biden, the president of the United States, excoriating CNN reporter Caitlin Collins because she dared to ask a question. And here's the clip.
What if you're not on the 16? What did he say about Paul Whelan and
Americans I have hope for.
I'd say again, we can't hear you.
I said the families of the detained Americans came up and we discussed it. We're going to follow through with that discussion. I am not going to walk away on that.
Why are you so confident he'll change his behavior, Mr. President?
Yeah, I'm not confident in changing behavior. What the hell? What do you do all the time?
So
when did I say I was confident?
You said in the next 6 months you'll be able to determine.
What I said was, let's get it straight. I said what will change their behavior is if the rest of the world reacts to them and it diminishes their standing in the world. I'm not confident of anything. I'm just stating the fact.
But given his past behavior has not changed, and in that press conference after sitting down with you for several hours, he denied any involvement in cyber attacks. He downplayed human rights abuses. He even refused to say Alexei Navalny's name. So how does that account to a constructive meeting as President Putin?
You don't understand that. You're in the wrong business.
Finally, CNN is asking a question that I think the American people would like the answer to, which is, Mr. President, you're meeting with Vladimir Putin, and we know that he has state-sponsored terrorism as it relates to cyber attacks on the United States of America. What did you discuss with him, if anything, and do you plan on taking any actions, and did you tell him so? And the president of the United States, Joe Biden, is like, no, I'm not going to answer that question. I mean, get out of here. We're not going to do this, because this is how the media treated him when he was running for office. They basically didn't ask him any difficult questions and gave him a pass, which is one of the key reasons why he won. If the American people actually knew what he was about, what he was going to put forth, and the fact that he probably isn't competent at this particular point in his life to be president of the United States. If they actually talked about those things during the election, he wouldn't be president. Now, finally, they're asking questions and realizing that the guy's a complete tool. So in the Wall Street Journal, we have an opinion article from Karl Rove, not my favorite person, but a good op-ed nonetheless, entitled Media Partisanship in Plain View. Journalists used to aspire to objectivity. Now they barely even bother to pretend. The media faces a growing crisis of confidence. Only 9% of Americans told Gallup last September that they have a great deal and 31% a fair amount of trust and confidence in the mass media to report the news fully, accurately, and fairly. And does anyone doubt that those numbers have dropped since then? Writing in these pages, Gerard Baker documented several recent examples of journalistic malfeasance, including Jeffrey Toobin's reemergence on CNN and new Pulitzer Prizes awarded for advocacy of approved causes. Let me add 2 more instances that grabbed my attention. Excuse the pun, I guess, with Jeffrey Toobin. One is the June 7th Washington Post story by, let me see, Jagana Turbati. Yeah, I think I got that right. On Republican governors who ended the $300 a week unemployment bonus, originally set to run through September 6th. They acted after local businesses reported difficulty finding workers. More evidence came in April when job vacancies hit 9.3 million. In other words, they went up, while only 6.6 million Americans were actually looking for work, meaning we were paying people to potentially stay home longer when we actually needed them back in the workforce, and the vaccine was readily available for you to get a vaccine so that you could go back to work safely if you wanted the vaccine. Mr. Turbati's piece was titled GOP Governors Are Cutting Unemployment Aid. Some have ties to businesses that may benefit. She unsubtly accused 4 governors of ending the benefits to enrich themselves, since they or their families own businesses that are looking for workers. These include resorts, an agricultural enterprise, an air conditioning wholesaler, the last with 19 employees. Ms. Turbati lists 2 other Republican governors who ended the additional unemployment insurance benefits and lack what she called any apparent relevant business interests. Presumably, so did the 19 other unnamed GOP governors who have discontinued the bonus. Applying the Turbati standard, can Republican governors show they're not basing decisions on personal connections to businesses that are trying to find workers only if they pursue policies that harm the economy and discourage people from working? The idea for this ideological hit job may have been Ms. Turbati's, but journalists come up with bad stories and bad ideas all the time. Where were the Washington Post's editors to wave this one off? Or would they ever apply Ms. Turbati's approach to policies favored by liberals? So you can imagine this particular op-ed goes on and does a really good job about how when you write a story about federal unemployment benefits resulting from the first pandemic in more than 100 years, and you have a vaccine that's now readily available, that is to say you don't have to wait in line, or if you have the COVID antibodies, you go back to work, right? It's time to go back to work. And instead of talking about all of the facts and the economic circumstances where employers can't get enough workers to come back, instead of doing that, Ms. Turbati basically did a hit job because it was all about partisanship. You know, we've talked about this so many times on this podcast, you hear it on others, but what's interesting about this is Karl Rove does a good job explaining all you had to do was just get the facts and the data from the fact that we had unemployment rates going up as a result of extending the $300 a month. $300 a week, I believe, is actually what it is. So extending that amount caused unemployment to increase. Less people in the workforce, even though more jobs are available than ever. And we actually deal with this in my office, which I rarely talk about in the House of Delegates, where we often will say, you know, we're now at a point in this particular part in American history where there are so many jobs available. And it's interesting, human nature is such that if you do get paid more to stay home, it might be more beneficial for you, at least you're making a rational decision to stay home, than if you go back to work. It's really interesting. I've always had this belief that people would much rather go back to work than they would just collect free money and not work at all. But there are obviously some cases where people do believe this. And there's no doubt in my mind that by eliminating these federal benefits, by giving the notice that you're not going to renew, that they're going to continue just for a few more months, it means it's time to get back in the workforce. I think we all agree with this, okay? But it's funny that the reporters can't even talk about this. They can't, They finally are talking about Flashcard Biden. They're finally talking about the fact that he doesn't want to answer questions. They're finally at least getting a little bit more engaged in the American government, but they can't help themselves but attack all the Republican governors for ending this $300 a week stipend. And we even have some people that send us emails, by the way, and they say that it's an entitlement. They're entitled to it. They don't use the word entitlement. They say, I'm entitled to this money. I'm entitled to this money. And if we're in a pandemic or a great recession kind of situation, I would agree. We need to keep things going. We need to keep people safe, and we need to keep them economically stable. But we are past that point. We're at the point where it's time to get back to work. So I'm just hoping that we can get more young people to go into the journalism business and actually fix this particular part of America, which is completely and utterly broken, by the way. But good for you, Karl Rove. Not a fan of mine. I'm not a fan of his, I should say, but at least he wrote something that is useful in the Wall Street Journal.